Hello. Can you hear me? Ah, good. Hello, Vernacular Faithful. Redcoat here. And today, I just wanted to, hit that one note again, particularly with regards to the game industry and where we're at right now. As you all know, it's been pretty rough, and we're still in that midst of talents being hemorrhaged everywhere and people still having kind of a hard time getting started in the space. Um, at least by all accounts, that's what I've been seeing, and the AAAs are still AAAing it up. I don't know if they'll. I mean, I think they're going to have to learn their lessons eventually, but they've got so much money, it's probably going to take a while. But all of that aside, that there's another question that you got to answer here, which is, yeah, they're messing up, they're doing their thing, and they probably there's a high chance that if you try and apply to them, they might overlook you unless you've got some really good SEOs, some really good what we call it resume foo, where you're able to get your thing to the top of the list, or somebody, or I mean there's a whole bunch of different ways to sidestep some of the issues, but it's usually personal to you, where you're gonna need to look at who you are, what you've got, and what advantages you can play out. But assuming that you don't want to play that game, what do you do? Well, it's there isn't really an easy answer to it. I mean, the first thing is you're going to have to accept at the start that when you go to do creative work, most creative work, unless you've found somebody to do it for, you're probably not going to be making that much money at it. Rather, you're going to be putting money into it. So that means the first thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to lock in some form of regular income, or place yourself in a position where you don't need to make that income. Now, I resisted it for a very long time, but I eventually decided that I needed to absolve myself of elements of rent. So I since my parents were still alive and I still have a good relationship with them, I decided, well, let's take advantage of that for a brief period of time because they missed me. So I decided, let's go. Let's hang out with them for a while, and we'll use that for we'll use that until such time as I can get back out there. Before that, the plan was simply to acquire a day job that paid a decent amount of money, perhaps exorbitant amount of money. And that's more of a thing of just looking at your personal skills, right? Originally, I was in the white collar space, so I was primarily doing a lot of testing, but I was also living in a place that was exorbitantly expensive. So even though I was being paid roughly, I'd say, what was it, like roughly 15 an hour in certain places, but usually closer to 11 or 12. um, I still had to do a bunch of things to make life affordable enough that my team could actually make games, particularly living with multiple people. In my time over in Seattle, I never lived alone. In fact, I always lived with at least two other people. I think the maximum amount that I ever had with me was five. That was a lot, and that was a very unique situation. We were holding on to the house for a dude that wanted to go to Europe for a while because this was during the run up to the 2016 election, and I think he saw some signs and was like, I don't want to be here, so he left. But he left the house in our care, so that was the exchange. Was we took care of the house while he was away. We paid rent to him, and eventually we got him. He was actually underwater on the house. So we got him out of the fire on that one. And so in exchange, we all had a place to live, and I had my garage studio that we could actually build product out of. So that's the thing, right? Again, when I was talking about use what is unique to you, look at your situation and start mathing it out. And if you're not certain on your own, bring your friends in that might be able to help you. And that's what worked out for me as far as getting a couple games made. But I digress. So making sure your living situation is cheap enough that you can actually afford it, which I mentioned before with the whole living with the parents thing. And what I'll say is that if you have the resource, just use it. Don't be embarrassed. If you have the resource, use it. Don't abuse it, because they're your parents. Love them, cherish them, and be an asset to them. And because this situation is enabling you to make the stuff, you should be focused on trying to make sure that it actually makes good for them too. Anyway, I digress. With that said, there's some other angles that you need to consider here. So, as I said before, probably not going to be making money to start. You got to build up your audience. And that means that you're not just going to have to be building a game, you're going to have to be building up your presence presence, but not just online. That's one of the mistakes that you can make, is just trying to make your presence just online. You need to be making your presence felt wherever it is you live, and you need to get a sense of who around you can become a super fan or a fan. Because as it turns out, being a hometown hero, being a local hero, that's a big boon. Being someone that people can kind of gather around. And this brings me to my next point, which is, don't just ask people to come to you. You want to make it so that there's a reason for them to look at you. So, what do I mean by this? Well, this would be something, say your main goal is to make a video game. Well, if you want people to be looking for your stuff before you actually make a game, then there's going to have to be something that you either give or do that people want. Perhaps before you make your game, you offer your services to other people who need games made. Now, that's a little bit tough and a little bit dicey because it's already kind of a hard market to get into, and it's a lot easier to make games these days. So most people are going to answer that question with, "Well, I'll just make it myself," right? However, some other angles that you can look at this from. Perhaps you're someone like me who their primary strength is their networking and charisma. So what you do is you act as a placement agency. You make connections with a bunch of people who need help, and then you make connections with a bunch of people who can help and funnel them through. And the idea being that since you're you and you're not you're not a HR agency, I mean, you're basically acting as one in this case, um, you can actually have a little bit more of a human element. And because you have a smaller set of clients that you're working for, you can actually focus in on them and helping them out and really give them that personal touch. So that's one way to kind of build up a reputation. And also, what you're doing while you're doing that is you're also vetting the people that you may eventually work with in the future once either their contracts run out or other things. You're making your contact list in that way. Now, one of the other things that you can do is if you're in the gaming space, think about doing reviews. Now, again, this is one of those things where there's some net foo that you're going to have to do, because it's not so easy as just picking an indie game and reviewing it and expecting people to just show up. You're going to have to kind of weave in and out through the well-known stuff to the unknown stuff, so that what you're doing is you're getting the goodwill of other independent developers, which that's increasing your contact list. That's making more people that you can work with in the future. But on the other hand, you're building up your audience with things that people are already searching for. So, you start out with a review of a Mega Man game, perhaps, and then you move to a Mega Man-like game, and then you do a Star Fox, and then you move to a Star Fox-like game, that sort of thing. But the idea is to, again, we're looking at this from the making content that people are already looking for and getting your reputation built up that way. But there's another thing, and so I've kind of been talking about this from the angle of terra firma video games. But remember, video games are a composite experience, and so what that means is that you've got a number of different artistic venues that are already presented in here. Like, you've got the visual stuff, you've got the narrative stuff, you've got audio stuff, and then you've got programming. So to be able to make money before you start making a full-on game, one thing that you can do is lean into one of those specific spaces. So if you're already a good artist, then just start doing art on commission. That will bring some money in, and whenever you do that, whenever you get a client, or wherever you post your stuff, you let people know, it's like, hey, I'm also going to be making a game soon, so if you want to get on the waiting list, here it is. That sort of thing. If you're more of a narrative person, start writing, and do one. I know one of the most common things people will do is set up a blog or something and start just churning out articles. And that can be hit or miss. It's really a matter of if you really feel like you've got something unique to say, and it seems like people like to read your stuff, because that's also a way to actually build up the SEO for your eventual company website, where you're going to have all of your games hosted, is to just have your articles up there and posting them regularly. Of course, you've got to be somewhat consistent. My advice would be 1 to 2 months ahead. Just have a whole cache of stuff. Just like take some time out 1 month and just generate a whole bunch of things, and then set them up to just fire off automatically without you having to do anything, so that you can focus on everything else. But that would be some of the other stuff. The other thing that I would mention is, so I've already said, pivoting into narration or writing, pivoting into the art side of things. If you're pivoting into audio, the answer is start doing sound effect work for other people, or making sound effect sets and selling them on various websites so that people can just buy them at their leisure. Making music, or perhaps mastering other people's work, and putting the thing out that way. Sometimes it might be as simple as going on Twitter and saying, I am an audio person. I do these sorts of things. If you need the help, commissions are open, and you kind of go from there. And again, this is all to get a start on your exposure online. And so one of the things that you do have to keep track of when you're doing all of this is not to get lost in the thing that you're doing, and remembering that you are going to pivot. And then I think one of the ways to really keep that in mind is to set yourself a goal. Like when you decide that you're going to make a game, just kind of be like, well, I think this is going to be a $5,000 game. This is going to be a $5,000 project, which is small. That's actually very small. But this is going to be a $5,000 project. So you just kind of go, okay, well, I will do my side jobs until I have $5,000 in the bucket. And then you probably want to do 50% more. So actually 75, 7,500. Just, add 50% to any particular projection you make. That's very important. Now, the other thing, let's say you're a designer, a design specialist. Well, what do you do then? Because your whole thing is you make games, you understand games. So again, I mentioned doing game reviews. That's one thing. But the other angle would be pivoting in working in something even smaller. Well, even a little less complicated, and something that you can do on your own, which would be making card games. Not board games, card games. Now, the reason why I say not board games but card games is a board game requires a lot more production. There's a fair amount of money that you're going to need to have beforehand just to get that going. But with a card game, it's really just you need to get your designs put together. You figure out your mechanics, buy yourself a few sets of 52 set cards to use as card stock, get some card sleeves, and you can chop stuff up, put it in there, and play testing is easy as 1, 2, 3. You don't need any extra plastic. You don't need any extra things. Technically, depending on what kind of game you're making, you could probably test it by yourself. That is at least to start. And the nice thing is, with a game that's based off of a 52 card deck, you can take it anywhere, break it out, and say, "Hey, I make games. Let's play." That's definitely something that I would do at various bars while I was in the Florida area. Would I just kind of show up and be like, "Hey, would you like to play a card game?" You do. You would. I made this. Here, let's try it out. And that made a few fans for me. People who were really interested to see where the card game went, and just really liked how the mechanics played and everything. But yeah, being able to break out a small thing like that and say, like, yeah, I make games. And then you can use that as your stair step inward, where you're like, well, also, this isn't the only thing I want to do. This is just the beginning. I do want to get into making digital games, but this is my first foray. This is my first hurrah, so to speak. So that would be one of the things, when you're looking at it from being a designer and trying to do this sort of business. Excuse me. But all of that said, it's just bringing it all the way back to that first question, which is, boy, the industry is doing some terrible things. It went out into the parking lot, and it's doing donuts on its head, and I don't know what's happening over there. I think it's dying, but I'm not sure. The important thing to remember is they're going to do what they're going to do. You don't need to necessarily worry about them, because you're not even competing on the same paradigm as them. They are going to try and sell like millions and millions of copies of things, and all you need to do to make a profit is probably sell like I'd say close to like 3,000 copies of one thing. You're on a completely different scale. You don't need to worry about what they're doing. You need to worry about other people in your space, sure, but don't look at them as competitors. Look at them as compatriots. Make friends with them. Get a network with them, because that is also where you're going to find the other people that you can work with. Because, I mean, it's a thing in most creative industries. We don't, it's not a forever, it usually isn't a forever job thing. It is contract to contract to contract usually. And so people are constantly shuffling around from team to team to team, with a few exceptions. Now, eventually, usually people find a place that becomes their forever home, but uh, generally speaking, in the creative space, it's more that a new project appears. We need people who can do X, Y, Z, and we need them for this period of time. Who's available? Who's available? You? Yeah, come, please. I will pay you to do this work and that sort of thing. So that would be one of the elements there. So, with all of that said, the only other thing that I should mention is you're going to want to form your company name, and you're going to want to make sure that it's something snappy, something that uh, most people aren't necessarily going to think of, and something that's mildly related to the work. So when you say the name, a person can kind of get what you're talking about. And usually that would just be add games onto whatever gobbledygook thing that you put in front of it. Or maybe that's the name of your company, Gobbledygook. My company is Gobbledygook. Gobbledygook Games. That's our thing. It alliterates. It's fairly memorable. Um, and it immediately, and one particular all important thing is it sparks a question that the person wants to engage with, where they're like, gobbledy what? Well, you do games, but what does gobbledygook mean? What does that point towards? Ideally, you would want something that more directly points towards the type of things you do. Like, say you call it edge runner games, and so it's a game that is like right on the edge of things, and you do a lot, is kind of edgy, kind of hardcore, but you're doing a lot of runners, a lot of infinite runners, and that's your primary thing. Um, and that's just to kind of start. Eventually, you'll if you're really good, like if you hit it really big, it'll get to the point where the name doesn't even match up to what you do anymore. Um, but that's one of the deals there. So I just wanted to um, talk a little bit in that space, because there's a lot of talk about crap being on fire, but there isn't as much talk about what are you even supposed to do about it. So I felt that it would be important to add my voice to that. Now, I will temper all of this with, I am not the most successful person. So take everything that I have said with a grain of salt, and run it through the rest of your lexicon of knowledge. Use discernment and look for others who have done the same thing, because that's going to be another bit. Now, I myself, I had a very hard time finding any real true mentors in the space, but I your results may differ. After all, that was back in 2008. Since then, there have been plenty of people like myself who have been banging our heads against this for years, some far more successfully than I have, and most of them are very happy to tell you their story and what it was that allowed them to get to where they are. And not all of them are nepa babies, as much as some of us might like to think so. So, with that said, I'm going to call it here. Thank you for listening, and like I said, take a look at your situation and examine it from an angle of, not what my disadvantages are, but what my advantages are. What can I lean into? What can I lean toward? It could be something as simple as I'm a cute girl, so I've I can have a much better online visible presence. Like I've got 10% plus. Um, or I'm a manly man, so I can lean into that and do something. But yeah, it's as simple as that. Just even the smallest little things can turn out to be advantages if you understand how to leverage them. Which that's the term they talk about in business. They're like leverage, 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 and a lot of people will say leverage, leverage, leverage without actually defining what that is. Leverage means taking a thing you have and using it to get somewhere else. Think of it as a fulcrum and a lever. You've got a lever. The item is at the fulcrum. To leverage, you go, and now you can get to the thing that's over there. Anyway, that's leverage for you. So this has been Redcoat of Vernacular Games, and you can find a few of our titles on our website vernaculargames.com, as well as on Steam and itch.io. The two titles are Highway to the Moon and Legends of Mathmatica Squared Under the Shadow of Certainty. Yes, I know, that's a mouthful. At any rate, we have those two products, digital products that are that have been on sale for a long time. So if you feel like it, definitely give them a go. We also have another product that is in the works right now. We're working with a man, Brian Garrett, to get the product Record Biz out into the world. And if you want to get on the waiting list for that, that's just underneath the title board here on the YouTube channel. So just it should be the top one in the list. Just go ahead and hit that button and go over there and join the email army. At any rate, there's plenty of other work happening in the background, but for now, I'm just gonna leave it at that. There's still a lot of ships happening here and there, people going everywhere doing their thing. But for now, I'm just gonna go ahead and take it to the sign off. So, again, this has been Redcoat, signing off. Play the games you want to play, boyos.